35. Welcome to Clinical Consultation Network, everybody. I'm so glad you could be here. You came on a great day because our guest again today is Dithu Rajaraman. Remind me your title from over at Vanderbilt. You're in the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center Triad program, Dithu.
That's exactly right. I'm the Director of Behavior Analysis Research.
Okay, great.
Over at Triad.
And you've been talking to us a lot about trauma informed ABA, essentially. And you're going to talk to us more about that today. So we'll get around to your introduction here in just a moment. I'm just going to mention a couple of announcements before we do. On December 13th, next week, we have Jared Adams with Evergreen, who's going to be here. Jared is going to talk to us about telehealth. And so they have a telehealth service through Evergreen that they offer. And Jared is going to tell us all about that service and how you can access it. And they're providing primarily primary care services through their service, I believe. But it'll be interesting to hear from Jared about exactly what they're offering and how that might be helpful to our audience. On December 20th, I am going to, we're tentatively planning something for December 20th. It may surround the holidays a little bit, something that will be themed around the holidays, but it will not be just about the holidays or just, some sort of a trivia contest, but we'll have something planned for you for December 20th. So hang in there with us and be there on December 20th. We're going to take a break on December 27th and January 3rd and come back on January 10th of 2023. I'm stunned every time I have to say 2022 or 2023. I was recalling yesterday when I was, I guess, about 38 years old in the year 2000. Remember Y2K? Y2K was this big thing for any millennials, or I guess millennials know about it, but maybe Gen Z doesn't know about it. That in 2000, we thought the electrical grid was going to go completely out. We called it Y2K. And so everybody was nervous about that. And on that New Year's Eve, we stayed up till midnight. And at midnight, I went out to the garage and flipped the main switch in the house so that everybody would think that all the electricity went out. And so that's I always think about that because that was 23 years ago. It seems like just yesterday. So, time flies, especially as you get older like me. So I really appreciate, though, Dithu, you being here with us today. Was there anything else I needed to announce, Babs, before I move on?
Nope, I just had Dithu's bio up, but we've heard it a couple times. But we do need a fun fact still today.
Ooh.
Well, you were talking about cricket a little while ago. That's pretty good fact, but
that's pretty fun. Yeah, I attended the 2019 Cricket World Cup. I got another fun fact for you.
Okay.
I'm in my 30s. I recently decided to get a nose piercing, and my mom tried to ground me for it. From
that's pretty good.
4,000 miles away.
Wow.
She got on that phone or on that FaceTime, and she let me have it, like I haven't experienced since I was in my, I guess 30s.
Hey, look, yeah, my mother got on to me until her death. She was always looking for things that didn't fit her frame.
That's right. Mom's gonna mom.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Dithu. It's always a pleasure. And with that, I'm going to let you just launch in. And I want to encourage our audience as you go through to ask any questions that they may have. We'll stop periodically and jump in with those questions. Babs, you look like you're wanting to say something. I'm just checking.
Nope, I'm good. I'm ready.
Okay. Just making sure. All right. Well, Dithu, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me back. For those of you that have been in previous sessions, it's nice to see you again. For those of you that are here for the first time, it's nice to meet you. I'll give a bit of a intro and background so that we can all get on the same page. What was very exciting for me is that I met a few of the folks that have been attending these trainings at the Tennessee ABA conference that was held in October. And we've had some great discussions just about the extent to which, how useful these sessions are in general for people's practice. So that's very encouraging for me, and it made me that much more excited to be back here. loosely, I've been sort of talking about the concept of trauma-informed care, what some of the commitments are, and with an overall purpose being how can we incorporate those commitments of trauma-informed care into our assessments and treatments for dangerous and challenging behavior exhibited by individuals of any age and with or without any type of intellectual developmental disability. Of course, I know this is a sponsored event by the Department of Intellectual Developmental Disabilities, so I'm happy to focus on that population. One thing that I've sort of neglected to do in the past 2 meetings is get a sense of where folks are working and the nature of the clientele. So I didn't make any polls, but if you wouldn't mind, does everybody have the ability to put stuff into the chat?
Yes, they do.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
so we can just ask them to do that.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind dropping a line, the first thing would be, do you work with individuals who engage in dangerous and challenging behavior? You could say yes or no, and then you could do a semicolon. And if you could just tell me the kind of setting in which you work, whether it's a adult residential home, whether it's a school setting, whether it's a clinic, I would love to just kind of get a sense. Please feel free to throw that in the chat.
All right. So if everybody will do that, that's great. All right. So we got Tracy. She said
Thank you,
yes.
Tracy.
Katie Kelly says yes in mobile crisis. Let's see, what else we got?
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Sharon.
Let's see. Yes, consulting in a wide variety of settings. That's Rick. In-home children up to age 4 with developmental delay was a yes for Leslie Milligan. Donna was a no. She said she used to in direct care.
Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, so it seems like by and large, you either do now or you used to, or you're kind of in some sort of a job where you're tangential to serving individuals who may every once in a while be in crisis or engage in dangerous behavior.
That suggested one way or another, everybody who's connected here probably has some connection to that group. I will say that because DID has historically served adults, but we are expanding now to serve children as well. So, we're always interested in additional information that would help us in that realm.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And just given the nature, especially that there are some folks who are working in crisis settings, I'm actually going to jump around a little bit if you'll allow me to. I'm going to try to go a little bit later into my talk, because this is some of the stuff that I've actually learned since I've been here at this new job. And as a brief reminder, the work that Triad does, especially one of the contracts in particular, is a school-aged contract. So it serves children in the public schools, but largely the kids who are at highest risk, the children who are being restrained and secluded and suspended and shortened school day the most in the state. We're kind of their first distress. We try to set up systems of support that can not only create meaningful outcomes, but that can most importantly and immediately just eliminate those dangerous episodes to the extent possible. And it's in that spirit that I'll skip around. So I apologize for the frantic slide skipping. Actually, I wonder if there's a more efficient way to do this. If I were to, when I do eventually go back and I walk through a set of intensive procedures, the procedures that I will describe are procedures that are kind of an intensive behavioral intervention. That is, you kind of have at least some dedicated time with this client, maybe 3 hours a week, maybe 2 hours a week, but in which you are able to sort of control your environment and use the science and technology of applied behavior analysis to teach really important skills in those authentically challenging contexts, because skill development is a really important way to overcome challenging behavior, and it's also a key commitment of trauma-informed care. But before we get to all that, this is something that we're literally learning in vivo in the public school system, is that when kids are in crisis and we're working in settings where there maybe are the resources, maybe there aren't the resources, maybe they're integrated into general education, we need to kind of squash challenging behavior right away, because what's happening is that the children that I work with are being restrained so much that people are being injured on the daily. The relationship between them and school personnel is just dwindling and deteriorating to nothing. And it's a pretty dire situation. So if you're working in situations where you're responding to crises relatively regularly, please know that we are too, and we're working through some things. Before we embark on an assessment and treatment procedure, we've been taking on these procedures that we've come to call the universal protocols. So if you'll allow me, I'll talk briefly about universal protocols, which are just a set of it's a nice way to start your relationship with a client that is geared toward minimizing any occurrence of challenging, dangerous behavior, and geared toward kind of providing the child with as much choice, agency, and freedom in their environment such that they are happy, relaxed, and engaged to a large degree. So basically, I'll start because if you see the slide that's up here, you see that there's a handbook that was published in my field about a decade ago about crisis for intervention for folks with intellectual developmental disabilities. And in that handbook, there's a chapter where they outline kind of 3 primary reasons why we might need to use things like physical management procedures like restraint and timeout. The first is as part of a comprehensive behavior treatment program. Throw a hand up or put something in the chat if you have behavior plans that kind of incorporate physical guidance or physical restraint in your procedures. This was what I cut my teeth on. Was I understood the function of a client's behavior, and then we'd put a procedure in place, something like an escape extinction procedure or a punishment procedure to block their responses, and that stuff was incorporated into our behavior plans. Oh, actually, I'm realizing now that I don't even see the chat, but let me see if I can pull that out. Okay.
Is your question related to in the past, have you done that, or are you currently doing that?
I'd say currently,
Okay.
in the past or currently, yeah. Does anybody, does anybody have in their behavior plans, if student X does this, respond with physical management, respond with a physical guidance procedure? I'll let that chat roll in while I talk about a second use of physical management might be to take a client or an individual to a timeout procedure from reinforcement. We might physically escort them to that timeout because it's a way to keep them safe. And then the third is in an emergency situation. This is probably the one that if there are folks in here who have used physical management procedures, you're probably most commonly going to do use physical management in those emergency situations for the immediate safety of clients, caregivers, and staff. This has sort of become normalized. This is sort of our status quo in our field, that we tend to not only rely on it as an emergency procedure, but that we even then go into incorporating it into our behavior plans. And to me, this is my assumption, a commitment of mine is that I believe that this leads to the long-term proliferation of dangerous episodes that result in restraint and physical management. So I hope that by the end of today, I can describe procedures that will show you that we don't really need to rely on physical management as part of our behavior treatment programs and as part of our and incorporate into timeout programs. I also hope that if you listen to what I'm about to describe, that the rate at which you need to use emergency procedures decreases significantly because there are some procedures. Do you see what I did there? That's my
I did. I love that
skill.
graphic. That was beautiful.
That's as talented as I get with a slide design. Otherwise,
I'm going to use that though in the future. Now that you've shown that it can be done, although I'll have to get some instruction on how to do it. But.
And so here it is. The thing that I grapple with a lot is that we talk about physical management procedures in the name of safety. That's thing number one. We do it because it is safe. And then number two is we do it in the name of kind of behavior modification. We do it in the name of our well-meaning behavior reduction procedures. But here are some alternative strategies that you might consider that you could really implement tomorrow that might help decrease these escalations and decrease the reliance on physical management procedures if that's something that you use regularly. I'll talk about these one by one. So the notion of a universal protocol is if you assume that we're meeting somebody new, we assume that there's a possibility that they've experienced some trauma in their life. This is a throwback to some of our previous content, but the stats are quite staggering in favor of folks with intellectual and developmental disability are much more differentially greater likelihood of having experienced traumatic events in their life relative to typically developing peers. And typically developing peers have a pretty high likelihood of having experienced traumatic events in their life. So with that as the background of the tapestry, and the secondary notion that when we actually document trauma and PTSD, we document that using verbal reports, we document that using questionnaires, and these are tools that have not yet really been significantly altered to apply to or to be useful for folks with intellectual developmental disabilities without strong language skills. So we often have clients show up to our doorstep and we have no idea the extent to which they've been traumatized, but there's a pretty good safe bet that they may or may that they likely have experienced at least one or a handful of traumatic events. So with that in mind, if you think about how we typically initiate our interactions with these clients, it's usually like, well, they're here with me and they're in this more resourced setting, so we're going to get to work. You know, my job is to make sure that I teach them about all the tough expectations in life. So day one, we're going to put a schedule going, and it's going to be, you better start working. You can earn these reinforcers or earn these rewards, but day one is day one of work. And I encourage you to maybe consider flipping that script and consider a notion that when we first meet a new client, our job should really be to make them feel comfortable, safe, happy, relaxed, and engaged. Our job should be that they are excited to be meeting with these new professionals, whether the professional is a behavior analyst, an occupational therapist, a crisis prevention worker. The relationship that we build when we try to eliminate evocative situations and try to eliminate challenges and instead try to promote their engagement with as many kind of fun things and rewarding things as possible is a much better starting place from which to implement maybe a more rigorous treatment or intervention that might result in some long-term behavior change. So I apologize, I wasn't able to make a slide for this, but I think that if you allow me to talk through it, it should make sense. When we call these things universal protocols, it basically starts with try to understand what are the things that your clients like a lot, and don't just provide one of those things, but try to provide all of those things to the extent possible, non-contingently. That is, when you first meet a client, you don't make them earn their favorite toy. You just say, here's your favorite toy, and I'm here to play with you. I'm not here to supervise you playing with it, but I'm actually here to build a relationship with you and play with those toys with you, engage in these puzzle activities with you. And we do that while simultaneously not presenting any kind of instructions, demands, expectations. And in so doing, we build a positive therapeutic relationship with our clients. We do this on the front end, like I said, to avoid re-traumatizing clients without them knowing. It would be, if you just can take the perspective of a learner who doesn't have strong language skills, who may have experienced trauma from adults in the past, abuse, neglect, what have you, them showing up to a new setting can be very scary. And so if we can do what we can and go above and beyond to mitigate that fear, to mitigate that anxiety, and instead say, I'm here to give you the things that I believe that you like, but more importantly, to follow your lead and discover what it is that you like together. I think that's a really, really great starting point.
So, Dithu, just quickly, it seems like trust has to be step one. I mean, you got to get a trusting relationship with a person before you can really launch into doing a lot of the teaching strategies that you might.
That's exactly right. And outside of the field of applied behavior analysis, I may know a little bit less about what the status quo is, but the status quo in behavior analysis is, frankly, not to start from a place of trust.
Yeah,
right. To start from a place of we got to get to work because I'm on the clock. You know, I'm on the clock to teach you 10 objectives by the end of the month. So let's go with objective 1 and 2 today. But Bruce, you said it exactly right. Establishing trust. Establishing trust is a vague concept. It's exceptionally important. Some procedures that help you do that are really back off, don't put expectations in place, really work hard to try to present as many preferred items and activities as possible, and really follow their lead so that you could learn more about, oh, well, I thought, their mom told me that they liked this puzzle, but they don't seem to engage with it. They seem to be wandering over to the toy room. Let's go see what they like, and let's allow them to play with those things. We've been doing this in our schoolwork because we're meeting kids that are in crisis. And for us to say, all right, the treatment procedures that we recommend do involve poking the bear. They do involve exposing learners to those authentically challenging conditions. But in order to get there, we need to have a starting point of safety, rapport building, and like I said, I think a useful metric is to think of trying to achieve happy, relaxed, and engaged with our clients. That they should be happy as opposed to sad, relaxed as opposed to anxious, fearful of what might come next, and engaged with things as opposed to just sitting there kind of idly twiddling their thumbs. Here's the main point that I want to make, and then I promise I'll go talk about assessment and treatment, is despite all these well-meaning attempts, if you take these main suggestions, you might be listening to me talking and you go, okay, yeah, sure, but obviously I can't just withhold all demands. I need to give some demands. It's a residential facility. They have to take their meds, or it's a school day. I need them to transition from the school to the bus. Yes, we totally acknowledge that there are some non-negotiable demands that are required. But a second recommendation under those situations is actually something that you see on the slide here, is to try to incorporate some choice-making opportunities. Try to give your clients some control in situations where you otherwise may say, I need you to take meds right now. Try to make aversive demands as less aversive as possible is a useful recommendation. And again, I'm saying this because it kind of goes against our status quo. Our status quo is typically, well, I don't want to confuse them. I need them to know that it is an actual demand. So I'm just going to say, you know what, put your stuff down. We're going to go do meds. If I need to carry you to the medication room, we'll do that. If I need to withhold all of your toys, I'll do that. No, instead I'm recommending try to make those kind of necessary demands as fun as possible. If you were doing fun voices with your client, keep those fun voices going. If they were, watching the iPad before, allow them to bring the iPad with you. Promoting those choice-making opportunities. There's over 100 studies that evaluated choice-making in the context of challenging behavior, and the results are pretty clear. Providing choices is kind of a net good thing. Providing choices tends to reduce challenging behavior. It tends to increase cooperative behavior. We can talk in a minute about if there are any problems associated with providing choices, but please know that the research is out, and then as well as in practice, it seems to be confirmed that choice-making opportunities are a good thing to offer to your clients. Okay, all that said, you have a new-ish client or somebody with whom you're trying to repair a relationship because you feel like it's just kind of getting bad, and you do all this hard work to try to create a safe, happy, relaxed, engaging space, but they're still every once in a while showing signs of agitation, or they're still engaging in dangerous behavior every once in a while. A big recommendation that I have, this is going to sound like I need to turn in my ABA card, but a big recommendation that we have is when they start to engage in challenging behavior, reinforce that challenging behavior. Give them the thing that you suspect they need in the moment, and give them all of the things that you suspect that they might need or be communicating for in the moment. Sometimes this is difficult to tell, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have a status quo that says, okay, you're a new client. I'm going to let you play with this, but the minute that you start biting your thumb, then I'm going to take that thing away because that's not how we do safe hands. And I'm going to revert to my planned ignoring, my withholding of all things. That's to me, that should be in our kind of our rear view mirror. Because especially when you're building a new relationship with a client, the notion that you give in to their early signs of distress, because sometimes we call them indicator responses, sometimes we call them precursor responses. Most clients have them. You know that when they're starting to really fidget their leg or start stomping or start whining in a particular way, that these major episodes are forthcoming. And my recommendation is if you and your team have signals, you're like, oh, that's a sign that something's about to happen. That's a great opportunity to give more stuff, to give all the things back, because what that will do is it is highly likely to promote safety in the moment. It's not the long-term solution. Please don't walk away.
No, I understand entirely. And, one of the things that I think comes to mind is that if you're into a battle with someone over something, you've kind of already lost. And so the goal is to reduce the duration of these things so that people aren't practicing over and over these things that you're trying to help the person get past.
That's exactly right, Bruce. And there's a, you know, it's worth mentioning. I don't love in having contemporary conversations about ABA and connecting the procedures that we do with our clients to the animal laboratory. But among us professionals, I think it's worth talking through this history in that these procedures, the procedures like extinction and punishment, were initially evaluated, investigated in the animal laboratory. And we learned a lot about how you can wield punishment procedures and wield extinction procedures to suppress behavior down to zero. The unfortunate thing that happened is when we extended that to human application, which we did in the 60s and 70s, to great success through many lenses, we kind of assumed that humans behave with respect to just one reinforcer in the same way that a pigeon or a rat may behave with respect to a food pellet or may behave with respect to some sugar water. But humans navigate much more complex environments than a rat chamber or than a pigeon chamber. So in translation from research to practice, we've gotten into these habits of, as soon as I see any kind of outburst, I'm just going to do my extinction. I'm going to do my planned ignoring. I'm going to do my take away your toys until you're calm. And all that stuff, we understood that from a conceptual perspective that will suppress behavior down to zero. But what we end up seeing in practice more often than not is that it actually, you get into these battles, as Bruce said, because there's probably more than one reinforcer in their environment that they're pining for, that they're engaging in behavior for, and that it's likely to result in a tussle, a struggle. We often have already lost, but then furthermore, the client has not really learned anything all that impactful from our well-meaning procedures of ignoring them or of punishing their behavior. So the script is flipping. I'm asking you all, I'm encouraging you all I'm giving you permission to give in when children start to appear agitated, because you avoid that major meltdown. You avoid needing to call for staff to go into physical management mode. And we're just starting to get some data come in, but the data are looking very clear that these procedures taken together, providing all reinforcers non-contingently, and then doubling down and reinforcing early instances of challenging behavior is a pretty reliable way to get episodes of behavior down to zero, and to mitigate like the need for physical management procedures such as restraint, guidance.
I'm glad,
So it's
I'm
a really
glad you're
great
getting
starting
some
point.
data out there on this, because the way I learned this was by failing at it numerous times before I realized this is not fruitful. And hopefully we can help people realize that before they get going, in the future.
I think so. And Bruce, we failed too, in the sense that with the start of this year, we had a bunch of cases come in, and we were like, great, let's get them started on assessment and treatment. But we realized even then that it was too soon. That the relationship in the settings was in disrepair, and so we were like, okay, well then let's spend a couple of days just doing this zero demands, all fun, try to make the kids love coming to school again. And we're seeing some great main effects of those interventions, that we're seeing the behavior go down. We're also seeing some neat indirect effects that when you just create this trusting, positive relationship with children, and then you just happen to invite them to an instructional opportunity, not expect them to, but invite them to, that some kids say yes. And they're like, the heat is taken out of the equation here. It's not about me versus you. It's not about if I say no, then you're going to take away my candy or my treat or anything like that. It's just becoming a little bit more of a collaborative relationship. But it would be premature for me to say that that's definitely the case. We're still collecting data on that. We're going to be analyzing it. Hopefully
That's good
disseminate
stuff.
it.
I'm going to hypothesize you're going to find confirmation though that's really a big factor.
I think so too. I think so. I will skip back up then, if I may. When I think around the end of last time that I visited, can y'all see a full slide now? Is that? I began to summarize the process of a more intensive assessment and treatment process. I'm happy that I had a chance to kind of underscore what I think the starting point is. The starting point is try to get a day or two with where you're just trying to focus on that happy, relaxed, and engaged. In so doing, by the way, you are learning a heck of a lot about your client, whether it's a child, whether it's an adolescent, whether it's an adult. You're learning what are all of the events that are needed in order to abolish challenging behavior. And what that really tells us about, it gives us pretty useful information about that which is reinforcing the challenging behavior. If you think about it from a logic perspective, if an individual goes individual who routinely engages in dangerous behavior goes 12 hours without engaging in any of that dangerous behavior, from our behavior analytic assumption, we would assume that that means that they have all of the reinforcers for that dangerous behavior. That is, there's nothing lingering in the environment that they need to engage in their dangerous behavior in order to produce. It's an assumption that involves a little bit of inferential leaping, but it's proved very, very useful here. So even in that initial universal protocol step, you're doing some of the first steps of the practical functional assessment. I think I remember talking about this last time. This is the assessment process where you try to understand what are the variables influencing the challenging behavior. Step one is interviewing caregivers or personnel who are intimately familiar with the challenging behavior. Try to understand not only what the topographies of the dangerous behavior are, but what those early signs are, some of those indicator responses. And like I just said, if you do that process of universal protocols where you try to reinforce everything, you'll learn what are all the events that are needed, what are all the stimuli, toys, activities, interactions that are needed to reinforce the behavior. And then what you can also surmise from this interview, from asking folks, is what are the suspected establishing operations, or maybe an easier way of saying that, what are the environmental triggers that trigger that behavior is likely to be evoked in a particular moment. I'll walk through a case example in just a minute so I can make a little bit more sense of this. This process that I undertake when I'm given an opportunity to address dangerous behavior also involves a functional analysis, which is a quick scientific validation of the hypotheses that we get from the open-ended interview. So an open-ended interview starts, this is my child, this is my student, this is my adult consumer. They engage in X, Y, and Z dangerous behaviors. Those X, Y, and Z dangerous behaviors are often preceded by some of these signs of distress. They might start whining, they might start jumping up and down in an angry manner. These events tend to be evoked by when I take away their preferred toys and I ask them to do their laundry. I take away their preferred toys, I ask them to engage in self-care tasks. And when we start to see these episodes of behavior, the only way that we can resolve it is by backing off on those tasks and by representing them with their preferred toys, and by maybe sitting with them, cajoling them, telling them that they're wonderful. Here's an example of an analysis that we ran with a kiddo named Brandon. And I'm not showing this to you to be like, let's analyze the data. I'm just trying to walk you through what the procedures might look like, to point out, that the functional analyses used to take weeks, even months, in order for us to complete. And now we can do them in 30 minutes or less, just because we understand a little bit more about how to do them in a contemporary manner. This is a client named Brandon who is 4 years old. So I'm so sorry for those of you who work with adults and are looking for some adult examples. I'll speak about an older kid later, but I promise that I can spend some time answering questions about adults if we have time. This is a 4-year-old. He was basically running his household. He was beating up his siblings, and he was doing it anytime he didn't have his way. And the only way that he'd stop engaging in these severe behaviors, these meltdowns, these aggressions, was when he got to do everything exactly his way. Simply put, he needed his preferred toys, he needed mom's attention, he needed her to do whatever he asked. So if you look at the graph, you see that there's 5 sessions from left to right. Those sessions all simply represent a 5-minute experience. In 5 minutes, in the control session, which are the white circles, we gave Brandon everything that he liked. We gave him toys. We told him he was amazing. We gave him undivided adult attention. And if he asked us to do funky things, he'd be like, put that car on your head. Or he'd say, you go stand in the corner. He loved telling me to go stand in the corner and turn around. He was allowed to do those things for free for 5 minutes. Then we go to the test session, the black data points. And we would start off in that same way. It's like, it's Brandon's way. We're playing. But every once in a while, we'd interrupt and we'd say, you know what, Brandon, we're all done playing. I'm going to chat with your mom and I need you to clean up your toys by yourself. And when we did that, we would keep that expectation in place until we saw the earliest sign of challenging behavior. For Brandon, he was a 4-year-old. He immediately just began whining. He'd go, no, I don't want to. And so as soon as we heard that whining, we'd say, oh, I'm so sorry. We don't have to clean anymore. Why don't we we could play these toys together. Did you want us to sit with you? And we go back to giving him some love for like 30 to 45 seconds. And we do that again. We do this to show some scientific confirmation that those events that mom reported as relevant to his challenging behavior are indeed relevant. And the scientific confirmation basically comes from this. I don't know if you could see my pointer, but it's as simple as when that contingency, the contingency being the if-then relationship between challenging behavior and those contingent reinforcers, those contingent rewards, when that contingency was absent, when he had his stuff for free, Brandon engaged in 0 challenging behavior. When that contingency was present and we put that interruption in place every once in a while, we immediately saw challenging behavior, and we saw it relatively reliably and quickly. When we then went back to a free play kind of thing, challenging behavior went back down to 0. And when we represented those periodic demands, challenging behavior shot up right again.
The function you were testing here was escape and attention in combination, right? Because there's the escape from the task that you had assigned, but then the attention that you were giving him as a result of, and going back to play with him.
That's exactly right. Instead of just doing each of these tests in isolation like it's a lab experiment, we were just trying to emulate that which parents said. And what parents said is, I often need all these things happen at once. I'm like, Brandon, I need my phone and I need you to get ready for dinner. Well, he'll have a major episode and then finally they'll resolve it by saying, okay, fine, you could sit on my lap, we could watch the phone for a few more minutes, and then we could wash up for dinner later on. So
analysis essentially on the interview that you've done with them to kind of narrow everything down and get down to the condition really that you need to test.
That's precisely it. Yes, it's a contemporary take on functional analysis. Functional analysis has historically been about trying to find the isolated variable that is maintaining challenging behavior. Instead, this approach shifts it to say, let's try to emulate the natural environment, but still show scientific and functional control over behavior. In other words, let's show that we could turn that behavior on and off in a functional analysis. And what that teaches us is 2 things in particular, well, 3 things in particular. Thing number 1, it teaches us that mom's hypothesis, her hunch, was correct. When we were able to interview mom and say, what are all the situations when it occurs? What are all the situations that resolve the challenging behavior? We were able to confirm that scientifically with an analysis. That's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is that in those test conditions, we were able to evoke that challenging behavior pretty quickly. As soon as we said it's time to, he even got used to it after a while because it was a simulation, but he'd even get used to it. We'd say, all right, I do need you to clean up. He'd go, and we'd say, okay, go back to playing. And then he'd go right back into kind of playing with us. That thing number 2 teaches us that we've found a highly motivating context, that this is indeed personally relevant to Brandon, and that this is a context in which we could probably teach some meaningful skills. More on that in just a minute. Thing number 3 is perhaps most important, especially as we talk about incorporating commitments of trauma-informed care. Thing number 3 is that we were able to turn Brandon's behavior off and keep it off with the provision of those suspected reinforcers. In other words, we knew what the kill switch was, that if things were to get too escalated at any point, we had one way to ensure safety that did not involve us needing to put our hands on Brandon. We can ensure safety just by giving all these reinforcers for free, by backing off and saying that we're sorry and that we love him. And that we were able to kind of show this through this analysis. And so this is, I suppose, a bit of a take-home point, because some of you might be like, I'm not in a position where I do functional analyses. And I think that makes a lot of sense in a lot of settings. I was trained in a setting where we did these month-long functional analyses, and as soon as I went to a second setting, I was like, that will never be applicable to my work. This is the method that has, for the first time, to me, felt more applicable. We are now doing this in the classroom context amidst other students being there, because we see these teeny tiny blips of distress signs, not even the dangerous behavior, We just see the whine before we suppress it or reinforce it, and we see it go away.
Dithu, I'm curious, do you use this with any referral, or are there sometimes where you don't even go to the trouble of doing an analysis?
I would say
Analysis.
if a learner or a client is being referred to me for dangerous behavior, I do at least some version of this process because
Mhm.
because of those the last two things I mentioned. If I don't have the right context, I don't know that the learner is going to be sufficiently motivated to learn the skills that I want. I'll give you an analog to that. I do a lot of communication training where I try to teach kids kids with autism words who don't have a strong language repertoire. And what I used to do is I'd take a Skittle or an Oreo and I'd cut the Skittle up into bite-sized pieces. And I'd say Skittle, and I will give you this 1/8 Skittle sliver, or say Oreo, and I'll give you this bit of an Oreo. If any of you have worked with young children, I think you know a little bit what I'm talking about. If you think about the motivation that setting sets up, is like, hey, if you do this new skill, this hard behavior, then you can have an eighth of a Skittle. That's how much this is worth to me. That compared to, hey, I'm going to take away all your favorite toys and your mom's attention, and I'm going to turn my back to you, and I'm going to ask you to do some stuff that you don't like. But all you have to do is communicate, all you have to do is engage in some behavior, press a button, give me a card, and all those things will go away. That's what I mean by it's a much more motivating context in which to teach. So that's why I do it. And then thing number two is definitely, at the very least, I need to be.
I thought Skittles were bite size, but you just made them even more bite size. But that is, yeah, I agree though, because it's a small thing, and actually it gives you a great bridge to eventually being able to fade it out. I mean,
Right.
you're going to move to a point where it's more social, I think, than it is probably even the tangible that you're providing in that circumstance.
That's exactly right. We're able to move this thing around once we're in treatment, but this is also an opportunity for us to, this will sound weird because it's a situation where I'm evoking challenging behavior, but I believe that it is actually a situation where we can imbue some compassion and where we can build trust with our clients. And we do that by reinforcing those earliest signs, by not waiting till behavior gets so extraordinary that kids need to put their heads through glass to communicate to us. We just teach them, hey, I am interested in learning what the situations are that are challenging for you. And as soon as you give me that sign, if you just grimace, you stick your tongue out, you say, I don't want to, I'm going to totally back off. And I'm going to teach you that your behavior has power, that your behavior has influence and impact on me and on other people in your life. I see a question in the chat from Rick. Says, I can't tell if you're on your graphs how many demands were inserted into each session. Thank you. That's a great question. If you look at sessions 2, 4, and 5, the test sessions, those were 5-minute sessions as well. And we essentially put a demand in place about every 30 seconds. So if you think about, if you look at session 4, Brandon engaged in 2 challenging behavior responses per minute. So what that kind of looks like, that basically represents the most optimal responding you could ever imagine. You're playing for 30 seconds, you say, you know what, we're done. They go, and you go, okay, we're right back to playing. Then you play for 30 seconds, you go, we're done, right back to playing. So 2 per minute is essentially optimal. It means that he wasn't sitting in the thick of that evocative condition for too long, that he was so motivated that he was immediately engaging in behavior to return back to that state. I want to be clear that these procedures have been replicated across all age groups. There's not a large body of literature for adult participants, but there's a paper, I can type it in the chat, that has summarized these procedures as analysis procedures, and they have shown that there's at least a handful of adults for whom we've been able to kind of demonstrate this context, this functionally relevant context via functional analysis.
Dithu, I wonder if one of the reasons that it hasn't been done as much with adults is because the gravity of the dangerous behavior is sometimes a lot more when you're dealing with a full-grown adult versus a child. I don't know. Do you have any alternatives or any other thoughts for people who may, where the risks of doing functional analysis for a person, who might have a substantial aggressive behavior? how you address those.
Yes. A few years ago, I would not have had a strong answer. Now I feel very confident. It really the magic is not necessarily found in the synthesized contingency. The magic is found in understanding what the non-dangerous associated behaviors are, or in other words, in understanding what the precursors are. This is not just a fluke. There are over a dozen, close to 20 studies that have asked this question. If a child engages in really dangerous if an individual engages in really dangerous head-directed self-injury, and that head-directed self-injury tends to be preceded by finger biting, by whining, by body rocking, they've asked the question, if we apply a functional analysis to those two behaviors, will we get the same result? In other words, is the body rocking reinforced by the same events that reinforces the dangerous head hitting? And in almost 100%, there's only one study that has not confirmed this finding, but in almost 100% of studies where they've asked that question, the overwhelming result is yes. If a client's parents, caregivers say, yeah, they're gonna bite their finger before they hit you, that finger biting will be reinforced by the same reinforces as the aggression, as the self-injury. The takeaway from that is that we don't need to see the dangerous behavior in our analyses. As long as we get good enough information, even subjective, open-ended, loose information from caregivers, from teachers, from other personnel, if we can do our homework on the front end to learn what are all those signs of distress, those non-dangerous associated behaviors, then we can, I have not seen a dangerous behavior response in a functional analysis in the past 3 years, based primarily on that assumption. So that's a very important one. And I really do see the next 10 years or more as a time in which we will proliferate our application of FA technology to adult populations, because you're very right. It's a high risk situation. It is quite literally, and I'll move on with the time we have left. I'll move on after this. It is quite literally re-traumatizing an individual for us to do this procedure. Let's just acknowledge that. It is an exceptionally, like the data backs it up. The science is there that when you engage in a functional analysis process, your treatment is likely to be 10 times, 15 times, 20 times better than if you don't engage in this process. So it is a very important step, but it requires that we purposefully, deliberately take a learner into a room and evoke their behavior. So any strategies that we can do to mitigate that risk, to mitigate the emission of dangerous behavior, and to mitigate people being in the dark about it, are ways that we can approach a trauma-informed model of functional analysis.
The benefits of confirming your hypothesis, though, are worth some risk in achieving that. So, and that's, I think, the basic point you're making there.
Yes, I think so. I think worth some risk, but again, it's a fine line. It's a fine line between how much risk is
Right.
Is permissible. There are some functional analyses data that are published in the literature, in our literature, as recently as 2017, where kids were engaged in more than 1,000 of these responses in this analysis. To me, we got to draw the line somewhere. I totally agree with Bruce that this is an important procedure because it will yield better benefits, but especially as we continue to expand the research on these safer, more humane approaches, we should really be reconsidering those standardized or those old school approaches that expose kids to too many of these dangerous situations.
You're going to go through it one way or another as you're learning the person. You've got a procedure here for doing it relatively quickly.
Yep, I think that's right. Are we like running low on time again?
Well, we're at 1:24, so we got about 6 minutes left. If look, you're great, so I'll have you back a fourth time if need be. And I hope I haven't interrupted too much. I really didn't think I had. It's just such a rich topic.
I think it was me digressing this time, but no. I was really happy to chat about those universal protocols because even with the brief information that y'all shared with me, thank you so much about the various contexts you're in. I know that you're not necessarily in an intensive environment where you have access to your client for 20 hours a week or something like that. And so I just appreciate that some researcher coming in and being like, please engage in these evidence-based procedures that often is met with like, well, I would if I could, but I can't. But I do feel strongly that in situations where you are interacting with individuals who engage in dangerous behavior, that the logic and spirit of what we call universal protocol, of starting from that place of my number one goal is to achieve joy with this learner, is a much better starting point than what I would describe as our sort of status quo in terms of care of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Thank you for that.
Yes, so there's a great question about how parents can apply this at home. So if you'll have me back, I'll come back and I'll share the treatment process, which will be a part 4 installment.
We're already getting you scheduled. In fact, we might even put you in on December 20th if you want to. I don't know if you'll want to or not, but
I'll have to check my schedule. I think I might be traveling that day, but
okay.
I'll happily come back in January. How parents can apply this at home? It's a great question. I think that a cost-benefit analysis is always important here. For example, what I'm describing basically means don't put any expectations in place for your children until you have an opportunity to, in a systematic way, teach skills of communication, toleration, and cooperation. That is something that to be continued. I'll have to wait till next time to talk about. But if parents are at home and they are in crisis, if parents are at home and their children are dominating every waking minute of the day, which is the truth for so many folks, challenging behavior has a way of becoming very pervasive and insidious and creeping out across every which context. If that is the case, then I think it's highly useful to impress upon them the spirit and logic of a universal protocol. All it is it's try to remove the known triggers for challenging behavior to the extent that you can. So there might be parents that are like, we're in crisis all day, every day, yet every day they are still asking their daughter to come have their hair brushed. Every day they are still saying, I need you to brush your teeth, I'm going to do it for you. And these are the events that are routinely on an everyday basis evoking challenging behavior. So we would just sort of recommend that you consider minimizing it. If it's not brushing twice a day, maybe you go down to brushing once a day. And maybe if that's an essential demand that is so important that you couldn't live without it, that you make it as fun as possible, that you get the iPad out, you maybe have some treats ready to go, that you make the event less aversive and more playful, because it just has ways of taking out the heat from it. And then, of course, that you incorporate some choice-making opportunities. Maybe you get 2 different flavors of toothpaste, and you say, you can pick which one you want to do today, and if you choose this one, you can even get a treat. Something like that. I'll be honest, we're in the early stages of investigating this in research. So I hate to give the answer, but it's going to take some time for us to really have a great decision tree out. But at this point in time, I feel comfortable disseminating the logic of it or the spirit of it, which is we put kids and adults through much more stuff. I'll save saying other S words. We put them through much more stuff than they need to actually be doing, and especially kids who are in crisis and who are routinely teaching us with their behavior that they don't want to be doing that stuff. And we can promote and achieve safety by providing reinforcers more regularly. Thank you for that wonderful question.
That's some good stuff, Thithu.
Great. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you coming on. You're really great. And I know our audience is very appreciative of you being here. And I hope we will get you back in January. So someday you're going to finally finish this presentation that you've been doing. But I appreciate you taking the time to answer questions and to deal with some of our questions about all that. So really
it's much
appreciate
better.
you so much.
I've said this before, I'll say it again. It's so much better when there's a back and forth. I enjoy this a lot. My colleagues here recently wrote just a quick 2-page primer on that sort of happy, relaxed, engaged mindset. I'd be happy to send that to somebody if y'all are able to distribute it out to the team.
Yeah, please do. In fact, we may use that a little bit as the smarticle for next time that we had.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, it's plain language. It's meant for educators, but I think it has applicability in other settings as well. And for folks that will join next time, if you have questions between now and then, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you again, Dithu, for being here. You're a wonderful guest. Thank you all for being here. This is the Clinical Consultation Network. We do it every Tuesday at 12:30. So join us again next week. Except we will miss 2 weeks. What are the 2 weeks we're missing? The 27th and the 3rd of 27th of December and the 3rd of January. We're going to take the weeks off there and then start back on January 10th. Maybe Dithu will be back with us on that day or another day in January. Thank you so much, Dithu.
Thanks, everyone. Have wonderful, happy holidays and all that jazz.
So long.